Welcome, everyone, to the Feminine Outliers podcast, your dose of fun, life advice, and experiences from two African professional women living and working in the Western world. We are your hosts, Cholwe Mandona
and Zelda Wasau.
And we are excited to have you here with us again. So, today's theme is dear to my heart because we will be talking about a new word that I've coined. It called Ubuntu-ness. So it's not obviously my word. It's the origin or the actual word is Ubuntu. But I have added the Ubuntu-ness to it. And if anyone has been interacting with me recently, I know, Zell, you've heard me say this a lot. Ubuntu-ness, Ubuntu-ness, Ubuntu-ness.
All the time.
Yeah, I just love that word. And you're going to understand why when I dive into it. But it's just it centers around this idea of connectedness and humanity, and that's something that I value a lot. And so every time I use the word Ubuntu-ness, it's a reminder. It's like one of my core values, and so it's a reminder for myself, and also a reminder for the people around me. So I think people tend to then get to know what it means, or what the word Ubuntu means. So anyway, as you can see, I'm already excited about this topic. But before we get into this theme, let us get into our unlearning pieces for the week. So I'll actually get started here. This week, I am unlearning that multitasking is not always the best approach to getting things done. So I used to take pride in being a multitasker, and I am still a multitasker, I would say. Usually over the weekend, I find myself doing so many things at the same time, or what seems to be at the same time. So I have the laundry going on. I am making bread in the oven. I am maybe watching some movie or show or something on YouTube. So there's a lot that's going on, at least in the same period of time. And for quite some time, I used to take pride in it because by the end of the day, I would say to myself, wow, I've really gotten so much done. And it felt good. I felt like a winner. I felt like an achiever. That, if I had 10 things on my to-do list, most likely those 10 things were done. And that was my measure of success for the day. But when I looked at it from my professional side of things, like my professional work, where the idea of having to multitask or switch between tasks, I realized that I was reducing the time I would spend on a particular task, and also my concentration would actually lessen every time I switched, going from one task to another task. Even as simple as just, let's say I am reading through a report or typing up a report, and then I engage in a conversation with a coworker. And then that distracts me from finishing up what I'm doing, and then trying to get back into that task, then having to reread what I was writing, and then trying to figure out like, oh, okay, what do I do next? And sometimes my creativity would lessen rather, Um, and so I realized, wait a minute, multitasking in this regard is not as helpful. So I've actually realized that blocking out time to pursue only one task and one task only um, is a much better approach, at least for me. And so the text messages have to wait, the coworker has to wait. And then, just to kind of get something done and out the way and out the door. And so, yeah, so just kind of realizing where it applies really well to multitask and where it doesn't. And so I'm learning that.
So it's funny you talked about multitasking because I watched a YouTube video, one of the YouTubers I tend to follow, and she's saying she's reading a book on how multitasking is not good for you.
Mm,
So she she's stopping her habit of multitasking.
mm-hmm,
It's funny that you said this because she just said it, and I think I watched her video yesterday.
mm,
So just thinking about that, I'm also a habitual multitasker,
mm,
and at certain aspects, I feel like multitasking is okay if you're doing something that's not important. Like certain
yeah,
times, like for example, I'm watching TV and I'm looking up flight tickets, or I'm filling in my calendar, or something that's doesn't take as much effort.
mm-hmm,
I just find that it's okay. But as you said, I feel like the problem with multitasking is you're not able to fully concentrate on one thing.
mm-hmm,
And so you can't, you can't accomplish the task as quickly as you would have if you're just focusing on it.
yeah,
So ironically, you end up being less efficient
right,
in a lot
exactly.
of scenarios. There are some scenarios in which you can multitask and get a lot of things done because the things you're doing do not require much effort, like much of your brain power to do them.
Mm-hmm,
But for the other things that require a lot of brain power, it's like you end up being less efficient. And that has happened to me at work when we can open up like four tabs, so four different patient charts
mm,
at a go. And sometimes, when I'm charting or like writing a note for one patient, then I get a text from a nurse,
mm-hmm,
and the nurse is like, and then I keep on getting texts from people. I think one of the hospitalists I follow also on YouTube was like, just finish the notes before you respond to those messages,
mm-hmm,
unless the message is urgent.
right.
But if you keep on doing it, it's going to end up taking you so much time because you're going to finish, you're going to open up the other patient's charts and do whatever the nurse is asking. You go back, and then you have to catch up with you have to kind of catch up with where you're, coming from. And it becomes a whole other thing.
Mm-hmm,
And so it just becomes this endless cycle.
yeah,
So that in that aspect, I'm like, wow, it's so true. Just sitting down and like, okay, I'm going to focus on this, finish it, get it done. You'll be surprised. You can
mm-hmm,
get things done quickly and more efficiently. And that's something I'm also trying to, unlearn it constantly because I'm like, nope, you don't have to do all of it. Just have certain time period which you do some A, B, and C.
mm-hmm,
Get it done. But like for me, the multitasking, it really affects me the most at work
yeah,
because that's when, my goodness, the number of texts you get during the day.
mm-hmm,
Oh my goodness. Like you think the world is ending and you have to address all those texts at some point,
exactly.
some of them immediately, and it's like, but then it's so hard because you have to do that, you have to still take care of your patients, talk to the patients, and it's just a lot. But I like that. I think it's a good reminder for all of us,
Yeah,
uh,
no,
in general.
yeah,
And I think it can be an episode on its own as well.
yeah.
Multitasking. Um,
We could probably do one for the career series on how we work at work. Or habits to take up, because it has been a big realization for me. and just seeing the differences in my productivity, like at home with home activities versus work. And I was like, oh, what is the one thing I'm doing different? And I think it's the multitasking bit at work. So yeah, so let's do an episode on this, or at least follow up on how my journey goes with that, making the switch. So
Nice.
ah,
Um,
all right.
so from my standpoint,
Mm,
what I am unlearning is feeling the need to rationalize everything, like to rationalize why I'm doing something,
mm,
or feeling the need to understand the necessity of doing something. The reason why I'm saying that is I realized in life, unfortunately, sometimes you just have to do things you don't want to do,
mm,
or that are just are not going to add any value to your life or to someone else's life or to the job or to whatever,
mm-hmm,
but you just do them because you have to do them. And it's a reality in life in which I'm kind of just realizing I should just, you know, just suck it up and do it. Because
mm,
you don't have to fully understand, why do I need to take this picture, or why do I need to do that? Why do I have to fill out this form? It's not making any sense.
mm,
Well, if that's what is required by the organization for you to do, you
mm-hmm,
could talk to them obviously and try to, make a more logical a form of way of doing something, but sometimes you just have to do it. And
mm,
I'm sure we've all had things in each stage of our lives that we do things that we don't necessarily want to do,
mm-hmm,
or we don't see the necessity of doing them, but they're just part of the job, part of the home life, part of this, and you just have to do them.
mm-hmm,
And for me, and learning the need to rationalize them and just accepting the fact that it is actually a part of life,
mm-hmm,
it's really helpful, because I feel like in each and every stage in life, you're going to have things that you have to do that you don't want to do, and you don't see necessary to do, or that will not add any value whatsoever to something, some aspect of your life,
mm,
but you still have to do them. Because if you keep on thinking, oh my goodness, why do I have to do this? Why? It's, it'll just drive you crazy, and you'll get mad at people because you're like, what's the point of you making me do X, Y, Z?
mm-hmm,
Now, I'm not saying don't try and talk to people, try and say, hey, I have a better option, a better alternative to do this. Would that be, and that might be more useful for us, might be more useful for us as your employees and all that. You can still do that, but still, just sometimes you just have to sit down and just get things done.
mm,
And I know this applies mostly for things that are outside of our control.
yeah,
I think for things that are more in our control, we should try to do things that really will make us better, or that will work for us
mm-hmm,
in some way.
yeah,
But when it comes to things that are outside of our control, you don't have to understand everything. You don't have to understand why you're doing everything. You don't have to rationalize everything. Some things you just have to do. And it's kind of a bitter, annoying pill to swallow,
mm,
but I think it's a fact of life.
it is. No, that's a very good point. And the thing I was thinking, in regards to what you're saying, was this is a very useful tip for relationships. And I mean all kinds of, social relationships, whether it's, for example, a partner, a sibling, uh, father, mother, where in some situations I know I've had to do things where it didn't make sense to me, but it made the other person happy that I did it, because whether it gave them some sort of, I don't know, psychological safety, some joy. And I'm just like, okay, for me, it was an effort, but me putting in that
Mhm.
effort made you happy. So I will do it because I love that person. So that's a very good point. And the other one is also around leadership. So I think as somebody who's a leader, I've come to realize that sometimes you have to trust your leaders in the way they see things and how they approach things, because sometimes when people question like why is this leader doing this, they don't see, they may not understand the vision of that leader, and so they're like, oh, why should I do this, this is illogical. But it makes sense in that leader's mind. Now, not every leader has the right intentions, but I've come to realize that if someone is really set on a particular way of doing things, it's probably because they may have had experiences in other ways that didn't work, and they really truly believe that this is the way to go. And so I've learned to not question leadership as much as I probably used to, because of what you're just saying. Sometimes you're just going to have to just, as a follower, you're just going to have to suck it up, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, that's I I'm not even gonna add anything to that.
Yeah.
That's simply a fact. Suck it up. But no, if there is something you can actually, if it's something that's they're telling you to do that you can see is totally wrong,
Mm-hmm.
then yes, you can say something. We're not saying you don't stand up and say something when things are clearly wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm saying we're talking about situations in which things are rather ambiguous or they're not really harmful, but they're not helpful.
Yeah. Exactly.
And, and I think that's where the issue comes. It's like, so why am I doing it?
Yeah.
But that's, I think this is what we're more so referring to.
Exactly.
But yeah.
Oh, I like that. I really do. That's a good reminder. That's a good reminder. All right. So now that we're done on our unlearning pieces, let's dive right into the topic of the week. Yay! Ubuntu-ness. Okay. So let me actually start there. Let me back up a little bit. I shouldn't just be like Ubuntu-ness, Ubuntu-ness. So let's start with the word Ubuntu. So I have with me the Wikipedia definition of the word Ubuntu. So Ubuntu is actually a Zulu word, um, and its meaning, according to Wikipedia, is humanity in Bantu. So, like the Bantu languages, for those that may not be familiar with the history of Africa. But it describes a set of closely related African origin value systems that emphasize the interconnectedness of individuals with their surrounding societal and physical worlds. Basically, the direct translation for Ubuntu is I am because we are. So, this idea of community, the idea of togetherness, of how we are pretty much one, and, that we serve each other. Um, and so, yeah, that's what it means. But the reason I'm diving into this is, as Wikipedia have said, I do feel, and I don't know, Zell, if you can also relate to this, but having been raised on the continent of Africa, I feel like one theme that comes out of my upbringing is this sense of community. It's very strong. Um, so just, growing up with family, also growing up close to extended family, but even just having neighbors, just the way we would interact with each other. I mean, my family, we knew our neighbors from every end of our neighborhood. And sometimes, sometimes we actually would gather and have parties. I mean, it just extends to school, even just the local butcher, like going to your local tailor, things like that. Like, I'm trying to find the best way to describe it, but there is just such a communal spirit that runs in the African culture. And I thought we should talk about this a little bit more, especially now that, Zell and I are living in the Western world. And I believe the Western world has more of an individualistic take on life and culture.
Hmm.
Yeah. And so how do we now view community, or, you know can we apply community to our current lifestyles? Has it changed? Is it non-existent now? um and yeah, just to kind of like dive into it, because I would say let's talk about the pros of having that communal aspect of our culture. Any initial thoughts on this, Zell?
I would say some of the pros. One of the pros I think about is just that sense of community just gives you, it's kind of a safety net, and it helps you, um, it's a safety net in the sense that it helps you feel good. You have people who you can quote unquote rely on.
Mm,
Uh, this is just that sense of security it gives you. I think is really helpful. Because when I think about Ubuntu-ness growing up, when you talked about your neighbors, I thought about my neighbors,
mm.
and I, we had such good times.
I know, right?
I think about it, like
Yeah.
sleepovers. I remember riding the bikes, like racing each other
Yes.
down the street.
Yes. Yeah.
Uh, like playing video
Oh,
games.
yep.
Oh my god, I remember that, and it's just this really nice, warm, fuzzy feeling it gives you when you can actually interact with people like that and have that kind of community, particularly like close to people who you're living with in your vicinity. That I remember so well, and it's so nice because you feel like these are the people who you can go to when you have an issue. You know, you can easily run over to the house and be like, "Hey, we've run out of this," or "Hey, this happened," or "This and this is happening," and they would be more like willing to help you out with giving you help you get you a solution or something like that. So that's when I think about Ubuntu-ness, that's in regards to my earliest memories. That's what I think of, because I think even like when I was a child, before we moved to like our house later on, um, I still remember just playing, having so much fun with my
Mm-hmm.
my friends and playing, and our parents hanging out and like talking, having parties, eating food together. It's just a really beautiful feeling,
Mm-hmm.
um, that that sense of community brings, that I feel like it's lacking a little bit in the Western world, but it's really beautiful back home.
Mm. Yeah. And the one thing I remember is the food, I guess. Like that
Hmm.
sharing of the food. And you just I remember the our neighbors actually used to bake pies and donuts every morning at one point. And we would always get like I my siblings and I would always go to my neighbors to get, like, it would be like a pie and a donut, and it just came out from the oven. um and that was really, like, those were good times before we headed out to school. I don't know, like, it's just something like that where it's just like sharing food. As you said, when you run out of something, you just walk over to your neighbors and say, hey, do you have this? I know that things have changed nowadays, but um that was fun. That was so much fun, and there's just like this carefreeness, right? Like, I don't know.
Hmm.
Like, there wasn't a feeling of like, should I trust this person? Should I not trust this person? Um, and so it was like having additional friends besides my siblings. Um, and
Hmm.
actually, for me, I think I was more of an introvert than my siblings, because like I like
Really?
I know. It's surprising, surprising. Like I feel like my brother would like leave the house early to go I hang out with his friends and then only come
Mm-hmm.
back like late in the afternoon. And you know when you're a kid, you're probably like you're tired, you're hungry, you need to take you need to take a bath. Ah, that's yeah, good times. um good times.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, and you mentioned, you know, that things are a little bit different in this part of the world where we have an emphasis on being an individual. Um, and I don't know, would you say there is still a sense of community though? Or is it something that you have to consciously create because it's not maybe let's say the primary way of viewing life.
Oh, okay. So all these are just my personal opinion thoughts.
Mm,
So I don't know if there's okay. I would say there's a sense of community in a different way.
mm,
It's not in the way I'm used to. Because for example, over here, it's not commonplace to just talk to your neighbors, go introduce yourself, talk with them and everything. Like people will be like, okay, kind of thing. Like there are people who don't even know their neighbors, never met their neighbors before.
that's true. Yeah.
Uh, so it's not commonplace to have that kind of interaction with people. I guess it might be slightly different with families because maybe when you have kids, the kids might want to play together. Um, but I feel like in the kind of sense, how as Africans we're just very outwardly welcoming
Hmm.
and just you see what you get, face value, and you just welcome, welcome
Yeah.
people in. I feel like over here there's a lot more planning that goes into place. Like back home, I could easily walk to my neighbor's house without actually worrying about. I didn't have to call ahead of time. Like, fine, if they're not there, it's fine. I'll go back home. But then I can just
Yeah.
walk in. Maybe they're having lunch or something. I join them, and you have that kind of freedom, which I feel like you don't have that over here. I feel like people are more regimented because they work a lot
Hmm.
and they work really hard. Um, I feel like they work more hours than back home because of how the system works over here. And so people are more like, okay, if you're coming to visit, okay, what time is it? They have to know ahead in
Mm,
advance. You can't just show up. And that makes a lot of sense.
hmm.
I see the purpose of that, but at the same time, I feel like it kind of reduces that sense of community when like, oh, I have to schedule an appointment with you to meet
Mm,
up with you. It feels less organic in a
yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
But I do feel like even though it might appear different than back home, like for me in Kenya, I feel like if, for example, you were to get sick or something were to happen to you, I feel like the neighbors, someone would help. Your neighbors would help in such a situation.
Yeah.
They might not know you and stuff, but I think in a situation like that, they'd be willing to step in. Um,
Hmm.
because I mean, you live right next to them. So I feel like when push comes to shove, they'd be able to help. But just the regular day to day, it's a bit hard. It's a bit different, because people are more in their own bubbles, and
Yeah.
people kind of stick to those bubbles. So,
Yeah. No, that's a very good point. And the other thing I was thinking about is that in terms of creating community, in some way, we are made to look for people that share similar values. So it's not necessarily like friendships are not necessarily based on proximity, like our neighbors, but based on somebody who either shares the same ideologies as us, values, and so you tend to then start finding your community by doing the things that you value, and then you meet
mm,
your people, or at least
mhm.
have that opportunity to interact. But yeah, like you said, it does take away that organic, spontaneous meeting of people, because it's kind of like you have to organize it. Like people who are in, let's say for example, if you go and play a sport, it's like, oh, this person values working out or playing a sport, and this is why I'm here. Um, but then if you're, just randomly just saying hi to someone just because it's a little bit, I guess I want to say awkward, or rather just not as welcoming. I think people would raise an eyebrow to some extent of like, I don't know you, why are you saying hi to me? um
Mm-hmm.
and so, yeah, huh, very interesting. um but then at the same time, now that we're here, I think it's good to reflect on what are the parts of Ubuntu-ness, or I guess community, or where do we see the limitations rather, um, of that sort of community style? Because I know I have grown from being a part of the individualistic society. I have grown as an individual, and I have been made to look within myself, figure out what are my strengths, what are my limitations or limiting habits, and also just spending time to visualize a future for myself, not thinking about my friends or my family, but just myself. So I've noticed that's been a big benefit, in this part of the world. And I'm just curious, like, even for you, like, if you've seen benefits and any limitations of having that community style of living.
Um, I would say the limitations I've seen when it comes to Ubuntu-ness are, I would say, I mostly see them from back home,
Mm,
in Kenya, or when if you have the same Ubuntu-ness among, your fellow Kenyans here in the US or something,
mm,
um, is I feel like people can take advantage of it.
mm,
I think that's a limitation I've seen because people assume, okay, so I can technically come to your house unannounced. So that doesn't mean you come all the time.
yeah.
But there are people who will just come, or you might have family members who just show up, and then you have to keep them. Yeah, you have to feed them. They have to have a place to sleep and stuff. And it's, you can do it maybe once, and it's cute,
Yeah.
but you keep on doing it again. You know, you still have a life you're living, a job you're working, and all that. It's disruptive, and it's you know I feel like that's an aspect in which people are taking advantage of the system because it's like, yeah, I'm just going to show up.
Mm,
And whereas I feel like in the States it might be a little bit more extreme in the sense that they're like, okay, we need to have like an exact time when you're showing up, and you're going to be here between here and here, between this time and that time. But then we have the opposite in which it's like, oh no, I'm just going to come, I'm going to stay over for as many days as I need to.
mhm.
And someone doesn't really stop to think, first of all, they probably don't even give you money to help them take care of you.
Yeah.
They're eating your food, sleeping in your bed, just using all your resources, and you don't have, like, it becomes a thing of, okay, but I'm working hard for these resources, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
That's taking advantage of the system. I feel like another way people have taken advantage of the system is when it comes to this whole, oh, because of our Ubuntu-ness, we are helping, raise money for so and so.
Yeah.
I feel like that's another way I feel like it's been taken advantage of,
Mm,
because why do we have to raise money for someone's wedding?
mm,
Like, can't you just? save up for your own wedding or have a wedding that you can afford.
Mm. Yeah.
Things like that. But they'll have set up a committee to so everyone can give money. Then they'll have the most lavish wedding.
Mm.
And that wedding is not based off their money.
Yeah.
It's based off money that the community has given. It's things like that that I have seen, or people just assuming that someone's going to give you money to go abroad to study.
Mm.
Things like that. I feel like there's always those people out there who will take it too far and just assume, okay, this is gonna happen. I'm gonna get money somehow, and it gets to a point where it's disrespectful because now, so you end up in a weird way. It keeps us. It kind of suppresses us in a weird way
Mm.
because you're always giving money for all these things because people have these expectations that you have to
Mm.
give money,
Yeah.
and that money you could be using it to invest for your future, for your children's future, for things like that. But instead, it's all going to all this thing because it's part of Ubuntu-ness. But
Mm.
if you don't do it, people will be like, "What is wrong with you?" Or they'll be like, "You're mean, you're stingy, or this and that." But
Mm-hmm.
it, it's a thing of yes, you can help people out if you want to, but it shouldn't be obligated, and people should not have a sense of, well, I expect them to help me because there are people out there who think like that.
Yeah.
You just expect that you're going to give them money for X, Y, and Z or do this and that. And it's an issue because have you ever thought about where that person is getting the money from?
Mm-hmm.
They probably don't care. But yeah.
Yeah. No, you have raised some really good points. I was actually cracking up as you were saying these points. Yes, and I think it's fair to say that it is an abuse of Ubuntu-ness, because there isn't consideration of the other person and what they're doing to attain the money that they're getting, for example. Um, and so and I think I guess it's also not having boundaries, in terms of
Mm-hmm.
how do we actually share, like how do I actually show that I care for you without sort of you stepping into my, I don't know, whether it's my space or my territory, where now you're starting to burden myself and my resources, and I'm having to somehow shift my life in a way that it wasn't my original intent. And now because of this situation, um, or because of your situation, I'm having to rethink about a lot of things. And I believe that's referred to, especially on the financial side. I think there's a term or a phrase like black tax. Um, Wh-
Yeah.
yeah, which we can even where I believe we're gonna have an episode on this. But yes, just this idea of our money, the money that we earn ends up going to whether it's friends or family, or to some cause, and you had your own intentions, but because we pride ourselves in being a part of a community and serving each other, then we are diverting our money to help. But then as you said, it's a limitation, because then you can't put that money into investments, you can't let your money grow, you can't, which could even serve your community even more. um
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, so there, it is a limitation. I can see that. um and I think for me, the other thing that comes to my mind is people tend to lose their creativity. um
Yes.
yeah, it's like people are no longer thinking for themselves. um
You took the words right out of my mouth because I was actually going to say
oh
that.
yeah, yeah, no, it's a thing, right? And in some case, if you are innovative, or if you think differently, in some way you're not part of the group. You're not part of that collective society. It's like you have, done something against the entire group, and people are now starting to wonder why, or they question your choices, and and they may think of you just differently. And so it's unfortunate in that regard, because unfortunate, and I think you said this as well, because everybody's thinking the same. It's like, if something's going to happen in that group, everyone is going down or going up, whatever the direction
Mhm.
is. And that is not a good thing in some cases, right? So it's
Mhm.
just being aware of that. I don't know if you have anything else you wanted to add to this.
Yeah, because I feel like, as you said, you just stop thinking for yourself, and then when you think for yourself, everyone is like, "Who do you think you are?"
Mm,
Like, kind of like, why you kind of become ostracized for actually stepping out and thinking and being like, well, I agree with I we do, like, we do this and that, but we don't have to do it in this way. Oh, there are exceptions to it, or things like that, because I feel like if you don't, it takes away your ability to think, and
mm-hmm,
so you don't even know when people have crossed the line, and when it's time to set a boundary and be like, nope,
mm-hmm,
I believe in helping out my community, being a part of my community, but when you cross this line, that is my boundary. It just goes out of the way, and so you just do things. And if you ask people, really, why do we do things like X, Y, and Z? And they're like, but this is how it's always been.
yeah,
And my answer to that would be, so
mm-hmm,
it doesn't matter if something has always been like that. And that's my biggest issue with tradition.
mm-hmm,
Traditions are meant to be valued, they're meant to be cherished, followed, but it doesn't mean you don't question tradition.
yeah,
Do you understand why you're doing what you're doing? And certain things, certain traditions you have might have served people a couple of years back, but they do not serve you now in this day and age.
mm-hmm,
And so it becomes the same thing of, so if you just go with the whole, no, 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 I'm going to do things just because this is how we do things, and I want to do it because everyone else is doing it, it's nothing's going to change. And so I have seen that for sure. People just, they don't think for themselves. And so it's like, yeah, I'm just going to give money for this because I'm supposed to give money for this.
mm-hmm,
But you haven't asked, but if this is not your responsibility, why is the burden on you?
mm-hmm,
If people just don't think for themselves. And I think it's, you know, I mean, I don't know how it is necessarily here in the States. I can't, I think, the States is on its own. And I know in the UK, they're on their own, like, pedals. They have their own issues
mm-hmm,
because they're now completely individualistic.
mm-hmm,
And then we have our own issues because we are completely Ubuntu.
mm-hmm.
We have to kind of have a mixture of both.
Exactly.
I think that's a healthy mixture. But I'm sure now when you start to tell these people that, no, you need to be a little bit more individualistic, they will look at you like, no, this is how our community works and
Mm-hmm,
has always worked, and it's been functioning well.
mm-hmm,
But it's not really functioning that well.
exactly.
If you actually look closely and you look within you'll see a lot of cracks here and there that
Mm-hmm.
people are just really good at glossing over because they don't want to address it.
Exactly.
But yeah.
No, you hit the nail on the head, as I was thinking that it is the solution, or the optimal way of, I don't know, living, is a mix of both worlds. And you sort of remind me of how some people get very defensive, where they'll say, well, I don't like the way these people do these things. And it's like, no, have you not seen the benefits of how they do these things as well? Because there are some benefits.
Mhm.
Um, and so, people tend to be defensive around tradition, as you put it, and they're never really thinking like, okay, how is this serving me? How is this making me be better? Um, and anything away from that tradition, it's like, like it's disobedience. It's seen as a disobedience,
Hmm.
and that as a result of that disobedience, there's going to be consequences, negative consequences for breaking tradition. um Not realizing that, oh wait, there could be benefits, because it's just a different perspective. um but yeah, so, but I guess that would be a good segue to talk about how would we revise Ubuntu-ness, like create version 2.0, where we do have that level. We do have a higher level of, I mean, let's put it this way. We do have a sense of individualism, but we still value that connectedness, that feeling of someone has got my back, or someone, or I can trust someone. um and because I'm sure even where we live right now, it's something that we can create, or people can create, um just so that they feel, comfortable in both worlds. So where it doesn't mean you just let go of your Ubuntu-ness because you moved from your home country and now you're in the US or the UK or wherever, whichever part of the world you're in, but just kind of saying, okay, how do I bring that Ubuntu-ness? Because for me, that's my thing is, how do I bring Ubuntu-ness into this part of the world where I appreciate it, and also even let my new friends appreciate it, but also maintain a level of individuality. Any thoughts on that?
I feel like that's a hard bargain to reach. It's a tough place to reach, and I think it takes a lot of working on yourself, knowing yourself,
Mm,
um, to get there. Because one, you have to know, okay, what are the faults in the system
mm,
in both ways. Like you have to know it. Like, so what is the fault in Ubuntu-ness, and how does it affect me? Because Ubuntu-ness, is vast and wide and will affect different people differently. So for you in your life, how is it? At what point is Ubuntu-ness negatively affecting you?
mm,
And when you see the negative aspects of it, now you'll be like, okay, how do I address these negative aspects? So it most likely means you have to learn how to start saying no,
mm,
setting up some boundaries because this aspect is affecting you. And it's all about, you know, setting boundaries and having a plan. If your Ubuntu-ness is sending money home, or you help so and so in the village, in this that in that village, this that, and then maybe that's for you, is your sense of community because you grew up seeing your parents, your family, your friends doing that for their community. But it doesn't mean you just give all the money you want.
mm-hmm,
Have a budget and say, this is my budget, this is how much I can give per month for X, for any kind of project like this.
mm-hmm,
And if once the budget is passed, I cannot give it because I'm past my limits.
mm,
And it's just, you have to actually know where exactly it's hurting you negatively first before you actually address it. Because, like, if you don't know what you're dealing with, how are you going to correct it?
mm-hmm.
So that's one of the things. So you have to know that, and you have to have a good, strong sense of self, because you will get some pushback
Yeah.
when people are like, no, this is how it's supposed to be. But you have to also have that strong sense of self. So you have to know what you're trying to fix, but you also have a strong sense of self. Um,
Mm,
and yeah, but and also don't feel guilty about it, because it doesn't make you less of where you're from. Like, it doesn't make me less Kenyan. It doesn't make you less
mm,
Zambian. It's just that we're just trying to be a little bit more progressive and more realistic and wholesome to do Ubuntu-ness in a way that is beneficial, while reducing some of the downsides that come with it.
Mm-hmm.
And people have to accept that for, I think, almost everything in this world, there are upsides and downsides to
Yeah.
things. And you generally just choose something that has the most upsides, and that has downsides that you can handle.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all about that. So
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's, an important way to start. At least that's how I would go about dealing with it.
Mm. That's a really good point, Zell. I really like that. Because obviously there are different forces like in these parts of this world that are impacting your life. And so if we were completely embracing Ubuntu-ness, I think certain parts of our life would be falling apart. Because
Mhm.
um, these cultures have, they promote individualism. And in fact, for me, the way I would actually look into this is go with the flow, go with the culture um, in this part of the world, but add Ubuntu-ness where it can actually fit in. So, an
Mm.
example would be, for example, in the US, it's such a the US has an entrepreneurial spirit. Um, and so if we are thinking of, let's help each other, why not create businesses if you have the opportunity to and market to people for which your products would make sense, right? Like
Mm.
um support local businesses, like support local. I believe in the US there's even a website where you can, for example, support BIPOC, so people of color that own businesses. Um, you can support them by buying products that are probably useful if if you're belong to, for example, if you belong to an ethnic minority or you're an African immigrant and you still want to experience this Ubuntu-ness, you can do that by supporting those businesses. It's just it's gonna be a different take from, as you mentioned, the donations and the gatherings that probably would have happened if you were back home. But in the US, it's through business, so support through business. Um, and in some instances, could even be at work. For example, you can organize
Mm.
like a lunch or a dinner where you just gather with friends, I'm sorry, with coworkers or even friends as well, and just show people that, where I come from, this is how we eat. We eat as a group, we hang out, we crack
Mhm.
jokes. And I'm sure, people who have never been to Africa would appreciate at least the culture, or at least appreciate the effort that you make. So it's just finding ways in the day to day life where you can fit in that Ubuntu-ness, you know?
Mhm.
Yeah.
I like that. It's it's a you know I think it's a tough, um I think it's a bit tough to do that,
Mm.
but it's also easy in a sense because you're just saying blend it in with the culture, find a way that it fits in. And I like that. It's, you're simplifying it in a way, but I mean, obviously, executing it is not as simple as just
Yeah.
how it sounds, because you really have to now dig deeper into it. But it's a really good point.
Mm.
It's very practical. I think I like the fact that it's very practical.
Yeah. And the thing for me around this and why I really love this topic is because I think it's another way of taking ownership and pride of where we come from. because I feel like when I hear conversations
Mm.
with people who have moved away from their home country and they're putting themselves in a new culture, I think people feel like they feel this sense of loss. And so what they end up saying is, well, these people here do things like this, and I don't do things like this. These people do this. So it's almost this, they create this narrative in their heads that it's me against them, but they don't realize that the people that they have come to, that's their normal life. Like they're not going to suddenly change and be like, oh, because Zell and Cholwe have come to this part of the world, we're now going to change the way we do things. It's actually going to be more of like, no, I've come here and I'm going to share with you my culture. Um, and I think it's just something that, for me, for example, it's very natural for me to connect with people, to say hi to people, to help people in the street, whatever. Like it's so natural because it's just the way I was raised. And I think there are ways I can still live that life out. But as you said, Zell, it's something that you're gonna have to think through and have a high sense of self, as you said. But people are also, there are people that are willing to learn and appreciate the culture that you come from. So I don't think it's a one-sided narrative, and you can also bring in your flavor,
Mm-hmm.
to these cultures as well. So
Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree.
yeah. So I'm excited. I really enjoyed talking about this. Um, and I'm really curious, ladies and gentlemen, about your thoughts on Ubuntu-ness, and how you are embracing it. If you're living, in the US, the UK, wherever you might be, it's a good principle to have, to be aware of your community and to serve community, because I do believe that, you
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean? I do
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I do believe that we are wired to connect with people. And so no matter how a society functions, there is still that element of connection. And I think it's something to maintain and embrace wherever we are. So I just highly encourage everyone out there to um, have that Ubuntu-ness, embrace your Ubuntu-ness, and teach people and share it with the people around you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we would love to know your feedback as well. Please let us know by writing to us at the feminine outliers at gmail.com. We are on all major podcast platforms, the big ones like Spotify, Apple Podcasts. So just find us there and share, like, if you enjoy this content. If you are, a frequent listener, we love you. Thank you for listening to us. And if you think this episode and other podcast episodes um, are of good content, please share them. Um, yeah. And, you know, follow us on Instagram. We are building our Instagram page.
Yes, please.
Yeah, no, follow us on Instagram and just look out for updates, announcements as we keep growing. So this has been fun. And so until next time, have fun, live large, and don't be afraid to be an outlier.